Today I'm making walking canes, turning them on the lathe. This is hard maple. As you can see, it's already been ripped to a taper. And I use this jig on the table saw to rip the wood into a tapered shape automatically. This is the same kind of jig that you would use to make a tapered table leg. So the wood is passed through the table saw once this way, and then turn 90 degrees, pass it through again, and what results is a square that already has the taper in it. This has a lot of advantages. One great advantage is that it conserves material. After you make one rip, you turn the board end for end and set up the jig again and make another rip. Each time you rip it, you flip it over so the tapered pieces nest into each other and you get the greatest yield of pieces from your board. The other advantage of ripping these into a taper first, when I put it on the lathe, I'm really just roughing it out and taking away the corners. And as soon as the flats are gone, I stop right on that line and I don't have to measure anything because the shape is automatic as long as I'm careful to stop as soon as all the flats disappear. This process involves using a steady rest. It's a rather extreme case of long and thin work. These pieces are 33 inches long, about 1 1/8 at the big end, and a 1/2 inch at the small end. This is very similar to making a shaft for a pool cue or a billiard cue. And in fact, the first stage of making a shaft for a billiard cue is exactly the same as this process that I'm going to show you today, which in this case we're making walking canes. But they start out pretty much with the same process. Normally when you set a steady rest, you make a place for the steady rest right in the middle of the workpiece, because that's where the amplitude of vibration would be the greatest. So if you can stop the vibration right in the middle, you have the most effectiveness from the steady rest. But because it's so long and thin, it's not possible to free turn the middle to create a place for the steady rest to be applied. So we're going to work in stages, as you're about to see. I start out by creating a place for the steady rest about 1/4 of the way the length. And that I can do because I'm still pretty close to the end where it's being held in the lathe. Once I get the steady rest in that position, I can leapfrog or hopscotch, or as you will, to the center, which would be the place where I ultimately want to get the steady rest applied. So I have to go in steps to get there because it's just too flexible to machine right in the middle. But I can do it right over here, and you're about to see that. I'd like to take a few minutes to answer some questions regarding the video that you just watched on how to turn a walking cane. The first question is, why am I using a spindle gouge as opposed to a roughing gouge or a skew chisel? And the answer is this. One of the principles of turning long, thin work, whenever workpiece vibration is a problem, is to use a chisel with a small nose radius, because such a chisel will produce a narrower chip, and the narrower chip imparts less cutting force and therefore less vibration to the workpiece. A skew chisel, by its nature, makes a wider chip and is not a good choice for long, thin work where workpiece vibration is a problem. The second question is, given the taper of the workpiece, don't you have to always cut from the big end toward the small end so that you're cutting downhill on the grain? And the answer is no, because in this case, the angle is so slight that that angle is actually less than the normal variation of grain that you would encounter in an average piece of wood. So this angle is so small that it's perfectly all right and equally effective to cut in either direction. And you should take advantage of that so that you have a better access and more comfortable turning. You can go either way on such a workpiece. And the third question is, you notice at one point in the video I referred to free turning. And what is free turning? Well, free turning refers to a situation where the workpiece is held between centers and is not attached to a chuck or a steady rest. And the pressure from the tailstock is zero or almost zero. And by suspending the work in that way between centers, you have the workpiece falling into its natural shape. It's not being deflected or bent by the chuck or the steady rest. And then you can create a place for the steady rest that runs absolutely true and continue on in that manner. So in the end, your workpiece will be perfectly straight. This is important when you're turning pool cues. It's not as important when you're making a walking cane, but it's still an important principle in spindle turning. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that these comments added to your understanding. Thanks.